we can now, and this is a follow-up action that we were to provide an update on the activities linked to the presence of nitrosamines in human medicines. As you remember, this has been quite a piece of work that we have been working in the past and that you were involved. Patients and healthcare professionals provide the critical input in managing this issue. And we would like to give you an update on where we are. And we have with us Antonio Acevedo, who is a team coordinator for nitrosamines in the inspections office, as well as Robin Ruep, which is the project manager on the referrals office, who is also deeply involved in this nitrosamines case. So thank you, Antonio and Robin, and the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. So we'd like to give you an update on where we are at the moment with EU network and EMA activities relating to the presence of nitrosamines in human medicines. And I'm handing over later to Antonio for the second part of the presentation. So just on the first slide, just our main goals, if you click a bit through, I think there's a bit of animation there. So in the first place, the way how to tackle this issue is just to set a bit the scenes or the main goals, of course, to ensure patient safety, but then at the same time also that patients can continue to be applied with critical medicine, and especially if they're treating life-threatening conditions. And but all actions, both on the safety and availability side, need to be supported by scientific evidence. And this is a bit where we started the whole journey on it. So on the next slide is a bit of a recap of where we are. What are nitrosamines? These are chemical compounds. They're classified as probable human carcinogens on the basis of animal studies. So it means there's a reasonable suspicion that they can create also cancer in humans based on animals that were exposed to them, and they develop cancer later. And this is a bit of the main structure that you can see there. If you're into a bit of a chemical background, so this is the structural feature that runs across all of these products. They're present in trace amounts in several products of our daily life, for example, just rubber in balloons or cigarette smoke. And then, of course, also in foods. It's common in water. For example, for food, we have cured meat products, processed fish, cocoa, beer, and there was supposed to be some announcement of where you can find them in the in food products from our partner agency, the EFSA. And pharmaceuticals, they are limited based on the theoretical excess lifetime cancer risk, meaning it's expected that less than 1 in 100,000 patients who are exposed to this nitrosamine, to a certain nitrosamine, has to be calculated for each of them, may develop a cancer during their lifetime. And from a given acceptable intake, a specific limit for this product can be then calculated based on the maximum daily dose and the treatment duration. In certain situations, and negligible risk is then linked to the levels below this established limit, these have been set at the setting of the limits comes not only from the ICH documents, but also were set up at the time of the initially there's a referral on Sartan medicines, and this week actually marks the 5th anniversary of the first time we have been exposed to this topic, when some of us were called to emergency meeting in end of June 2018 on the presence of nitrosamine in valsartan. But since then, there was not only the occurrence in valsartan, it was in other sartans, it was in other products. And this one, then on the next slide, you see that it triggered a procedure where we looked into all medicinal products in the EU, not only to set limits, but also look into root causes, analytical aspects, and toxicological things. And then as part of this procedure, if you go to the next slide, this was a call for review of all medicinal products of biological or chemical nature. The EU was initiated, it's still ongoing. In the first step, the risk evaluation was to be done for both chemical and biologicals. Just companies had to say either we see a risk or we don't see a risk. And if there's a risk identified, companies would move into confirmatory testing. And once a risk is identified and confirmatory testing confirmed their presence, especially at certain levels, then companies need to do also changes to their marketing authorization. So meaning the dossiers that the agencies or the EMA hold backing these products, and basically the basis for the licensing. And these need to be varied. Depending on the issues, and some need to include manufacturing process changes. We even had some root cause linked to packaging, then excipients, so the substance that you need that are mixed with the active substance to form the final finished product, or the product specifications by itself. The deadlines for step 1 and step 2 have mainly passed. For biologicals, they have time until the 1st of July to carry out confirmatory testing and then change the marketing authorization. And for chemicals, this will be the 1st of October this year. So if you go to the next slide, what has changed a bit since this Article 5 review? This you see also that we have also the assessment report published on our website and all these details, but this focused mainly on small molecule nitrosamine impurities. So if you heard about NDMA or NDEA at the time, with a known high potency. So there's data from animals where we know that exactly after a certain dose they develop a cancer, and this was then extrapolated to humans. So this is quite robust. They were mainly from manufacturing process of the active substance. Only a few were then from the finished product manufacturing, but this were only then mainly small nitrosamines and with a known risk. But then over the time it emerged through this call for review specifically that this not only small nitrosamines were reported, but also those products where the R that you saw earlier in the formula was not sticking to a small molecule, but really to the active substance. So we had initially was earliest detection was a valsartan nitrosamine, where the nitrosamine was sticking on the molecule itself, but there were multiple instances where this happened as well. And then on this note, I would like to hand over now to my colleague Antonio, and he can take you further through the activities there, specifically also NDSRIs, this called API-derived nitrosamines, and what we are doing at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin, for the great presentation. Well, like you were saying, since 2022, testing has revealed that the presence of an increasing number of nitrosamines that are derived from the active substances themselves. So they are referred to as nitrosamine drug substance related impurities, this acronym NDSRIs. And as you said, they are mostly thought to be byproducts of reactions between the APIs and trace impurities in commonly used excipients. So in the majority of the cases, these nitrosamines are structural features of the API, are inherent to the API, and cannot be avoided in practice. And like the small molecules mentioned by Robin, where robust toxicological data was available, for these specific complex nitrosamines, these data was not available, and the agency has been working closely with international partner regulators and holding continuous discussions with industry to better understand the risks associated with these NDSRIs. Obviously, as the scientific knowledge evolves, the agency has continued to publish and update guidance on this on the nitrosamine issues, and obviously all policies and approaches agreed since the beginning of the call for review take into consideration the protection of public health, ensuring safety of the products and keeping at the same time disruptions to the supply of medicines to a minimum. Next slide, please. So regarding the main regulatory developments since the last update provided to PCWP and HCPWP last year, these developments have been focused on the update of the published EMA question and answers guidance to marketing authorization holders. So as you can see, in May 2022, Q&A 20 was published to clarify the regulatory steps taken by authorities following the identification of nitrosamines where the limits were exceeded. Then in October 2022, question and answers 21 was published to set a temporary universal limit to be applied while the definite limit, let's say, is being established by the non-clinical experts at the non-clinical working party. And finally, in December 2022, Q&A 22 was published to inform stakeholders on the applicability of the less than lifetime approach. So higher limits would be allowed while companies are implementing the preventive and corrective actions needed to their manufacturing processes to mitigate the presence of nitrosamines impurities in medicines. Next slide, please. You can continue. Yeah, well, the implementation of the scientific conclusions, as you might imagine, needs a set of mechanisms, and these multiple mechanisms are achieved through a network approach. So these include the nitrosamine implementation oversight group, or NIOC, where non-product specific oversight is foreseen. So policy discussions and scientific discussions with the stakeholders through a dedicated work plan in order to ensure the consistency in the approach and the update of available guidance as new data and science is available. There's also the Nitrosamine Multidisciplinary Expert Group, or NMEG, which is a scientific group convened by the CHMP to discuss and ensure availability of medicines deemed as critical, and to provide guidance to authorities on the consequences of a potential stopping of treatments or of switching to alternative treatments versus the risk to patients from using products with a higher level of contamination for a very limited period of time. There's also quality and non-clinical experts groups. So at the KWP and NCWP level, there are experts specifically involved in discussions with stakeholders on the topic of nitrosamines. These expert groups provide input on product and non-product related matters, including the approaches on setting these limits. Last but not the least, there's the Nitrosamine International Steering Group. Obviously, international harmonization and dialogue with EMA partners is of prime importance. So this international steering group ensures the sharing of information, the harmonization, and the alignment of scientific discussions. It's also supported by technical subgroups focusing on quality and safety topics. Next slide, please. So as a conclusion, it's noted that since 2018, there has been a significant progress made in understanding and controlling the risks of presence of nitrosamines in human medicines. The principle, the key principle has always been the balance between the patient safety on the one hand and the availability of medicines on the other hand. Patient safety is ensured through the establishment of these dedicated mechanisms and groups we have just described, and the availability of critical medicines is also achieved through the multidisciplinary nitrosamine expert group, the NMEG, like we just also described. In terms of the call for review, it is in process in progress at the time. The overall progress indicates a high level of responses. It is expected to be finalized in October, and the key conclusion from the data obtained so far is that the majority of medicines is not at risk of presence of nitrosamines. Scientific progress and harmonization is continuously promoted also with the stakeholder engagement and with the update of guidance as new data becomes available. And again, to underline the engagement at global level with international partners, and to raise your awareness on a major update that is expected very soon, where a new approach has been developed for determining the limits for nitrosamines, and this new approach is expected to contribute to further sustain the management of products with nitrosamines and ensure the availability of supply. So this new approach will take into account the molecular structure of nitrosamine to determine the potential risk associated, and then based on this structural consideration, each single nitrosamine will be placed in one of four categories, which each category having its own limit. And in addition to this new approach, international regulators have agreed on a new protocol for a test that will make it possible for companies to use higher limits if the test demonstrates that the nitrosamine is not genotoxic. Thank you very much for your time to accommodate us, and I will hand over the floor to the chair, and Robin and myself are surely available to provide any feedback you might want.